My name is Samantha Clark, I'm 29 years old, and if you asked me to describe my life up until that wedding day, I would have said, messy, but mine. I never thought I'd end up being the girl everyone whispered about at her own wedding. Not because of the dress, not because of the groom, but because of the look on my mother's face when her carefully rehearsed speech was interrupted by a phone call that changed everything. Let me back up. I grew up in a small town outside of Dallas, Texas, in a family where appearances were everything. My mom, Karen, had always been obsessed with status. She cared about which neighborhood you lived in, which car you drove, and, most importantly, who you married. So, when I started dating Ryan Mitchell, a corporate attorney from one of the wealthiest families in Dallas, my mom practically threw a parade. Ryan was polished, charming, and calculated, everything my mom thought I needed. But here's the thing, Ryan never saw me as an equal. He saw me as someone to mold, to show off like a shiny accessory at his firm's events. My mom encouraged it, whispering that marrying Ryan would secure my future. What neither of them knew was that, behind the scenes, I wasn't just sitting around waiting for Ryan to put a ring on my finger. I'd been working 80-hour weeks building a startup with 2 college friends. We were in tech, messy, scrappy, and surviving on ramen and caffeine. My mom called it a hobby. Ryan called it cute. Both of them assumed it would fizzle out. So, as I walked down the aisle on that August afternoon, I already knew my marriage was less about love and more about merging into the Mitchell empire. My mom was beaming like she had just won the lottery. But then, in the middle of the reception, she leaned over and whispered, loud enough for my bridesmaids to hear, "Enjoy it while it lasts, Sam. He'll leave you with nothing when he's done." What she didn't know was that my phone, tucked away in my clutch, was about to light up with a call from my lawyer. And the news he had for me? Let's just say it was worth a whole lot more than the Mitchell family name. The reception was everything my mother had dreamed of and everything I had quietly dreaded. Chandeliers glittered above the ballroom, waiters floated around with trays of champagne, and a string quartet played in the corner while guests mingled like it was some kind of royal gala. I smiled for photos, let Ryan's mother fuss over my hair, and endured endless small talk from his colleagues about how lucky I was. Inside, though, my stomach was knotted. My mom's words from earlier, "He'll leave you with nothing," were still ringing in my ears. She always knew how to cut me down, how to remind me that in her eyes, I was still the girl who never measured up. I wanted to snap back, to tell her she had no idea who I really was, but instead I swallowed it. After all, weddings weren't the place for drama. Or so I thought. Halfway through dinner, my clutch started buzzing under the table. I glanced at the screen, Michael Harris, attorney. My heart skipped. Michael wasn't the type to call unless it was urgent. Excusing myself quietly, I slipped out into the hallway. "Michael?" I whispered. On the other end, his voice was calm but electric. "Sam, I had to call you right away. The merger just closed." I froze. "Wait, you mean $2 billion. Your shares were locked in. You're officially worth more than most of the people in that ballroom." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My knees actually felt weak, and I had to lean against the wall to steady myself. $2 billion. Not million. Billion. I thanked him, hung up, and just stood there, letting the reality sink in. The company everyone had laughed at, the one Ryan dismissed as a little side project, had just become one of the biggest acquisitions in Texas that year. When I walked back into the ballroom, I must have been smiling without realizing it, because people started asking what had happened. That's when my mom leaned over again, narrowing her eyes like she could sense something was off. "What's got you grinning like that?" she asked, her tone sharp. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her judgment. I simply said, "You'll see." And soon, everyone in that room would. The speeches had just started when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Michael, it was one of my co-founders, Emily. She had texted. "It's everywhere. CNBC, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal. Congrats, boss lady." My heart kicked up. I slipped my phone back into my clutch, forcing myself to stay calm, but my chest was practically buzzing with adrenaline. I wasn't just sitting on the news anymore. The world was. Ryan's best man was droning on about his brilliant career in law when I noticed the first ripple. At the far end of the ballroom, a guest pulled out his phone, frowned at the screen, then whispered something to the woman next to him. She gasped. A moment later, someone else checked their phone. Then another. Within 5 minutes, the ballroom had shifted. People were no longer politely listening to speeches. They were glancing down at their screens, whispering, pointing, at me. Ryan noticed too. He leaned toward me, irritation flashing in his eyes. What the hell is going on? Before I could answer, his uncle, one of the senior partners at his firm, stood up from his table, holding out his phone like it was breaking news from another planet. Ryan, he called out across the room, your wife's company, is this true? The room went dead silent. Every eye swung toward me. My mom's fork clattered against her plate. What company? She asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. I smiled then, a slow, deliberate smile I had been waiting years to allow myself. The company you always called my hobby, Mom. We just closed a $2 billion merger today. The silence cracked open like thunder. Guests started murmuring, phones lit up, people began searching my name right there at their tables. My bridesmaids looked like they wanted to scream with pride. And my mother? She went pale. For the first time in my life, she had no words. I thought that moment would be enough, but the real shock hadn't even hit yet. Because Ryan, the man I had just married, was about to show me his true colors in front of everyone. Ryan's face tightened the second I said the words, $2 billion merger. He blinked, then gave this stiff little laugh, like maybe I was joking, like maybe it was some kind of wedding day prank. But then the room started buzzing louder. People were pulling up articles on their phones, showing each other headlines with my name in bold print. Dallas-based startup acquired in $2 billion tech deal. My photo, the one from our last press interview, was already circulating. Ryan's laugh died in his throat. His jaw clenched, and his eyes flicked to me, sharp and cutting. You didn't tell me. His voice was low, but I felt the venom in it. I kept my smile steady. I didn't think you'd be interested. You never were. That hit him. His hand tightened around his champagne glass, and for a second, I thought he might shatter it. The man who prided himself on control, on composure, was slipping, and everyone could see it. Are you telling me, he said slowly, like he was trying not to raise his voice, that while I was planning this wedding, you were hiding a $2 billion deal? I tilted my head. No, Ryan. While I was building a company, you were planning this wedding. A low murmur rolled through the crowd. I caught sight of Ryan's father at the head table, his face flushed an angry red. His mother looked like someone had just slapped her. My mom was still frozen, clutching her wine glass so tightly I thought it might break. Ryan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a hiss only I could hear. You've embarrassed me. Do you understand that? I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in, not pride, not support, not even curiosity. Just bruised ego. For years, I'd thought my mom was the only one who underestimated me. But in that moment, watching Ryan unravel, I realized they were the same. Both of them thought I needed someone else to define my worth. And right then, in front of 200 guests, I decided I was done proving myself to either of them. But first, I was going to make sure everyone in that ballroom knew exactly who I was. I could feel every eye in the ballroom on me, waiting to see what I would do next. My mom was stiff in her chair, Ryan was fuming beside me, and the whispers had reached a fever pitch. For once, I wasn't the quiet one in the background, I was the headline. I stood up slowly, the scrape of my chair against the marble floor echoing louder than the string quartet in the corner. I raised my glass, forcing the room to quiet. If you've already checked your phones, I said, my voice carrying over the tables, then you know the news. For those who haven't, yes, the company I co-founded just closed a merger today. $2 billion. A ripple of gasps and claps broke out. Some people even whistled. I saw Ryan's jaw tighten further, but I didn't stop. For years, I continued, my mother told me I needed to marry well to be secure. And my husband, I paused deliberately, my eyes cutting to Ryan, told me my work was a distraction, a hobby, something that didn't matter. Ryan muttered under his breath, don't do this, but I ignored him. But here's the truth, I said, my voice steady. I didn't marry into money. I built it. From scratch. While people doubted me, laughed at me, told me to be realistic, I kept going. And today proves why. The room erupted. Applause, cheers, even a few standing ovations. My bridesmaids were wiping tears, proud and smug at the same time. My mom looked like she might faint. Ryan's family looked horrified. I lifted my glass higher. So, to everyone who thought I couldn't do it, thank you. Because your doubt fueled me. And now, I'll never need to depend on anyone to define my worth. I sipped my champagne, calm and deliberate. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. But as I lowered my glass, Ryan leaned in, his voice like ice. You think this changes anything? You'll still regret humiliating me. I met his stare without flinching. No, Ryan. The only regret I have is not seeing who you really were sooner. And with that, the applause around us turned into something else entirely, a room full of people finally realizing the power had shifted, and it wasn't in Ryan's favor anymore. Ryan's smile, the one he had practiced for every firm event and family gathering, was gone. What replaced it was raw, unfiltered anger. His knuckles were white around his glass, and I noticed for the first time that his hands were shaking. He stood up so abruptly that his chair tipped back and crashed onto the floor, the sound cutting through the applause like a gunshot. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. You think this makes you better than me? He snapped, his voice louder than he intended. You hide a deal like this from your own husband and then brag about it in front of everyone? Do you have any idea how pathetic that looks? Gasps echoed across the ballroom. His mother shot up from her chair, hissing, Ryan. But he wasn't done. You're selfish, he spat, pointing at me like I was some criminal on trial. You care more about proving everyone wrong than about this marriage. Than about me. I kept my eyes on him, calm in the storm. Inside, my chest was thundering, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me crack. You're right, I said softly, but firmly. I don't care about proving myself to you anymore. Because I already have. The room broke into murmurs again, half shocked, half thrilled. Ryan's face twisted. You'll regret this, he said through gritted teeth. All of it. Marrying me, humiliating me, acting like you're untouchable. You're nothing without. Without you? I cut in, my voice sharp. That's where you're wrong, Ryan. I was everything before you. And I'll be everything after. A cheer broke out from the back tables. The kind of cheer that spreads when people have been waiting for someone to finally say what everyone else is too afraid to. Ryan's father pulled him by the arm, trying to drag him back down into his seat, hissing something about keeping it together. But Ryan jerked his arm free, stormed out of the ballroom, and slammed the doors so hard the chandeliers shook. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. And then, slowly, the applause returned. Louder this time. Directed at me. My mom was pale, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide whether to scold me or defend me. But deep down, I could see it in her eyes, she knew she'd lost. I smiled, raised my glass again, and said, now, let's get back to celebrating. And just like that, the wedding reception turned into my victory party. The music started back up, but the atmosphere had completely shifted. Guests who had come expecting a polished, picture-perfect Mitchell wedding were now buzzing about something far juicier, me. I barely had time to sip my champagne before Ryan's parents closed in on me. His father, Charles, loomed tall and red-faced, trying to plaster on a polite smile but failing miserably. His mother, Elaine, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Samantha," Charles said through his teeth, his voice low but dripping with tension, "you've put our family in a very difficult position tonight." I arched a brow. "By being successful?" Elaine stepped in, her tone clipped. "By ambushing us. You could have told us beforehand. We could have managed the narrative." "Managed the narrative," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "You mean spin it to make Ryan look like the real star?" Elaine didn't deny it. Her silence was confirmation enough. Before I could respond, I felt a hand on my arm. My mom. She pulled me aside, her nails digging into my skin like she could drag me back into the role she wanted me to play. "Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed, her face inches from mine. "You embarrassed him. You embarrassed me. This isn't how a wife behaves, Samantha." I pulled my arm free, my voice steady. "You've spent my whole life telling me to marry into power, Mom. I didn't marry it. I built it." Her eyes narrowed. "Money doesn't make you powerful. Connections do. And after tonight, you may have burned everyone you had." I laughed then, quietly but with an edge. "No, Mom. After tonight, the only connections I burned are the ones that were holding me back." She opened her mouth to argue, but then I saw it, the flicker in her eyes. Fear. Not for me, but for herself. She'd built her identity around controlling me, around boasting about the daughter who married into money. Now that story was gone. I leaned in closer. "For once in your life, you're not the one holding the cards. I am. And you'd better get used to it." Before she could fire back, one of Ryan's cousins rushed over, phone in hand. "Samantha. They're interviewing your co-founder on CNBC right now. They called you the woman of the hour." The cousin's voice was bright with excitement, and for the first time that night, I let myself grin fully. The spotlight wasn't just on me in that ballroom, it was on me everywhere. And no amount of my mom's bitterness or the Mitchells' damage control could change that. The ballroom had slowly regained its energy, people were laughing again, music was playing, and I even danced with a few of my college friends who were practically glowing with pride. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Ryan hadn't come back, and that wasn't like him. He thrived on appearances. Walking out of his own wedding reception? That wasn't a move he'd let stand without spinning it somehow. Sure enough, as I was sipping champagne near the dessert table, I heard a murmur ripple through the room. Guests began pulling out their phones again, holding them up with wide eyes. A bridesmaid rushed over to me, phone in hand. "Sam, you need to see this." I took the phone, and there it was, Ryan, live on social media. He was standing outside the venue, tie loosened, face flushed but controlled. The caption read, "Ryan Mitchell speaks on his wife's surprise announcement." I hit play. "She blindsided me," Ryan said to the camera, his tone calm but bitter. "Marriage is about trust, and today I found out my wife doesn't believe in that. She kept a $2 billion deal secret from me, from all of us. That's not partnership, that's selfishness." The video ended, but the damage was already spreading. Guests were whispering, the Mitchell relatives were nodding solemnly like this was their vindication, and my mother had that smug little smirk she wore whenever she thought I'd just proven her right. I handed the phone back, my stomach twisting, but not with fear. No. This was something else. Resolve. I walked straight to the stage, motioning for the band to pause. The chatter quieted, all eyes turning to me again. I picked up the microphone. "I see Ryan's already giving interviews," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "And since we're being public tonight, let me make something very clear." I scanned the crowd, my gaze finding every Mitchell face, my mother's, even the guests who had come just for free champagne and gossip. Partnership is built on respect. On believing in each other, even when no one else does. Ryan didn't respect me. He didn't believe in me. And if I had waited for his approval, or my mother's, I wouldn't be standing here today. I'd still be the girl they called a failure. So if anyone here thinks I should apologize for being successful, you're in the wrong room. The ballroom erupted again, louder than before. Cheers, applause, even people standing and clapping like it was a standing ovation. And in that moment, watching their faces, I realized Ryan's little stunt had backfired. He thought he was painting me as selfish. Instead, he'd handed me the microphone I needed to tell the world exactly who I was. The applause was still echoing when the ballroom doors slammed open. Ryan stormed back in, tie undone, jacket missing, his expression somewhere between fury and desperation. The music stopped on its own, like even the band didn't want to compete with him. He marched straight toward the stage, eyes locked on me. For a split second, I thought he might actually try to rip the microphone from my hand. Enough. He barked, his voice echoing through the room. This is my wedding too, Samantha. You don't get to turn it into your personal press conference. The crowd went silent, every head swiveling between us like it was a tennis match. I held the microphone steady, my voice calm. Funny. You didn't seem to mind when the wedding was all about you. His face darkened. This isn't about me, it's about us. And you've made it clear that in your world, there is no us. Just you and your damn company. I set the microphone down slowly, then stepped closer so only the first few rows could hear. No, Ryan. This was never about us. It was about you wanting a wife who would make you look good. A trophy to match your career. But I'm not your trophy. His jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. He grabbed the microphone before I could pick it back up and turned to the crowd. You see what I'm dealing with, he said, gesturing toward me. A woman so obsessed with her ego she couldn't even be honest with her husband. This isn't strength, it's arrogance. Boos rang out. Actual boos. Not from everyone, but enough to cut through the air. Some of Ryan's own colleagues were shaking their heads, muttering to each other. A few even walked out. And that was when it hit me, his power, his carefully curated image, was crumbling right there in front of everyone. I picked the microphone back up, gently but firmly pulling it from his hand. Arrogance, I repeated. No, Ryan. What you're seeing is independence. And if that threatens you, maybe you were never the man you pretended to be. The cheers this time were deafening. People stood, clapping, some even chanting my name. Ryan's face twisted, rage and humiliation warring on his features. And then, without another word, he stormed out again, this time for good. The doors slammed shut, leaving me alone on the stage with a roomful of witnesses who now knew exactly who I was. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight lift from my chest. I hadn't just taken control of the night, I had taken control of my story. The moment Ryan stormed out for the second time, the Mitchell family leapt into action. Charles Mitchell was on his phone immediately, his voice low and furious, probably barking orders to a PR team. Elaine was whispering frantically to anyone who would listen, trying to smooth things over with that brittle smile plastered on her face. But no amount of spin could undo what had just happened. People weren't talking about Ryan anymore, they were talking about me. Every table I passed, I caught fragments of conversation. She built it herself, $2 billion, can you believe that? He looked pathetic up there. I tried to keep moving, shaking hands, thanking people for their support, smiling when I had to. But I could feel it, someone was still watching me. My mother. She waited until I was alone near the back hallway, then swooped in like a hawk. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble as she approached, her face set in that familiar mask of disapproval. You think you won tonight, don't you? She said, her voice low but cutting. But what you really did was destroy your marriage before it even started. No man with real power will touch you after this. I let out a dry laugh. Good. Then I won't waste my time with men like that. Her eyes flashed. You're throwing away everything I worked for. The Mitchell name, the security, the connections, you just burned them all down in one night. And for what? To grandstand? I stepped closer, my voice quiet but steady. No, Mom. I didn't burn anything down. I built something of my own. Something bigger than the Mitchells, bigger than you ever thought I was capable of. And that's what scares you, isn't it? That I don't need your approval anymore. For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw it, the sting of truth, the recognition that she had lost control of me. You'll regret this, she whispered finally, her voice trembling just enough for me to catch it. I straightened my shoulders. The only thing I regret, Mom, is ever believing your definition of success. Before she could respond, one of Ryan's colleagues came rushing up to me. Samantha, reporters are outside. They want a statement. This is bigger than a wedding now. I looked back at my mother one last time, then turned toward the doors. For the first time in my life, I wasn't following her expectations. I was walking straight into my own future. The air outside the ballroom was thick with late summer humidity, but I barely noticed. Flashbulbs went off the second I stepped through the doors, a crowd of reporters clustered near the valet stand like vultures who had smelled blood. Guests who had slipped outside for air were suddenly standing straighter, realizing the real show was about to begin. Ms. Clark, one shouted. Is it true your company closed a $2 billion merger today? Did your husband know? Another pushed. Why wasn't this announced before the wedding? Do you see yourself as more powerful than the Mitchell family now? The questions came rapid fire, voices overlapping, microphones shoved toward me. My instinct was to flinch, to step back, but then I remembered Michael's call. Emily's text. The way Ryan had tried to turn the spotlight into a weapon. No, this was mine now. I raised a hand, steady and calm. Yes, I said, my voice firm enough to cut through the noise. My company finalized a merger today. Yes, it was $2 billion. And no, my husband didn't know, because my company wasn't his business. It was mine. A ripple of surprised murmurs moved through the reporters. Cameras zoomed closer. I continued, for years, people told me I couldn't do this. That I should settle, marry well, let someone else take care of me. Tonight proved them wrong. I didn't marry into wealth. I created it. And if that makes me intimidating, so be it. The crowd erupted, shouts, more flashes, more questions being fired. I caught one that made me pause. Do you think this marriage will last after tonight? I let a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth. That's not the story tonight. The story is that women don't need to be saved. We can build our own futures. And that's exactly what I did. The reporters surged forward, but I handed the microphone back to the event staff, signaling I was done. I wasn't going to stand there and let them pick me apart. I'd said what I needed to say. As I turned back toward the ballroom, flashes still lighting up behind me, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. My wedding had turned into a public battlefield, and somehow, I had walked out the victor. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Ryan wouldn't go quietly. And my mother? She'd find another way to come after me. The difference now? I was ready for both of them. The reception wound down without Ryan. Guests started slipping out, whispering in little clusters, some still buzzing with excitement, others clearly rattled. By the time the last champagne flute was collected, I was exhausted but strangely alive, like I'd just crossed a finish line I didn't know I was racing toward. I thought maybe, just maybe, Ryan had decided to lick his wounds in private. But the next morning, my phone proved me wrong. I woke up in the hotel suite alone, no note, no message from my husband. Instead, there were notifications. Dozens. My name was trending on Twitter, my face splashed across financial blogs, my wedding speech replayed on Instagram Reels. And then I saw it, a headline that made my stomach drop. Ryan Mitchell speaks out, betrayed on his wedding day. I clicked. It was a glossy interview he'd given late the night before. He sat there in his loosened tie, looking wounded, spinning the story like a pro. She lied to me, he told the reporter, his voice low and heavy with manufactured pain. A marriage is supposed to be about trust, about honesty. Instead, I find out on my wedding night that my wife hid billions from me. If that's not betrayal, I don't know what is. The clip cut to him staring off dramatically, like he was the tragic hero of some Shakespearean play. My stomach twisted, but then anger burned through it. It wasn't enough that he'd humiliated me at the reception. Now he was painting me as deceitful, selfish, even unworthy of sympathy. And worse, people were buying it. The comments under the video were split. Half were calling me an inspiration. The other half? Calling me cold. Manipulative. A gold digger who struck gold. Gold digger. The irony nearly made me laugh. I sat up, heart pounding. This wasn't just about me and Ryan anymore. He was trying to undermine everything I'd built, tarnish my reputation before it even had the chance to rise. My phone buzzed again. A text from Emily. He's playing dirty. But he doesn't realize, so can we. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Ryan thought he could use the press to control the narrative. But what he didn't realize was that my company's deal had made me more powerful than he could ever imagine. I had allies. I had resources. And now, I had a reason for revenge. I sat at the edge of the hotel bed, phone in hand, as Ryan's interview replayed again and again on the news cycle. Each time, the same words hit harder: betrayal, dishonesty, selfish. He was trying to carve a scar into my reputation before I even had a chance to enjoy what I'd built. But what Ryan didn't know was that I wasn't alone anymore. Emily called before I could even text her back. "Sam, listen," she said, her voice sharp and energized. "This isn't a fight you win by ignoring him. He wants to paint you as a liar. Fine. Then we hit him where it hurts, his image." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "What are you suggesting?" "Receipts," she said simply. "Every time he dismissed you, mocked your work, tried to control you, I guarantee there are emails, texts, voicemails. If he wants to make this public, let's go public." At first, I hesitated. Dragging private messages into the open felt ugly. But then I remembered the look in his eyes at the reception, the way he pointed at me like I was some criminal. He had chosen the battlefield. I wasn't going to walk in unarmed. So I started digging. And it didn't take long. Emails where he told me to stop wasting time on that app and focus on planning the wedding. Texts mocking my late nights at the office. Voicemails reminding me that the Mitchell name will always matter more than your little project. By noon, Emily and I had assembled a tidy little timeline. A portrait of a man who never believed in me, who tried to clip my wings, who was now scrambling because I'd flown higher without him. Michael, my lawyer, joined the call. "We don't even need to leak everything," he said. "Just enough to discredit his story. One well-placed release to the right journalist, and the tide turns." That night, we did just that. A trusted reporter at the Dallas Morning News got the exclusive, behind the Mitchell wedding meltdown, the truth about Samantha Clark. The article dropped at midnight. It painted me not as a liar, but as a woman who had been underestimated, dismissed, and still managed to build an empire. The receipts were woven in carefully, enough to prove Ryan's hypocrisy without making me look vindictive. By morning, the shift was already happening. The hashtag Team Samantha was trending. Business leaders were tweeting their support. And Ryan? He had gone completely silent. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. But deep down, I knew him well enough to realize he wasn't done. Ryan never quit when his pride was at stake. And that was fine. Because neither did I. By the third morning after the wedding, Ryan's silence broke. I knew it was coming, I'd been waiting for it. Sure enough, my phone buzzed with alerts before I even got out of bed. Ryan Mitchell speaks exclusively with GBN. Mitchell, I was used. I pulled up the clip, jaw tightening. There he was, polished again, the damage control mask firmly back in place. He leaned forward in the studio chair, speaking with practiced sincerity. "She married me for the name," he said gravely. "For the prestige. She knew what she was doing. And then she humiliated me publicly, on our wedding night. That merger? That was her way of telling the world she never needed me. I was just a stepping stone. I wanted to laugh at the sheer audacity of it. A stepping stone? He had convinced himself that my success was somehow a reflection of him. But the kicker came when the host asked, "Do you plan to stay married?" Ryan sighed, like a martyr carrying the weight of the world. "I'll be filing for an annulment. I won't let myself be used any longer." I sat back against the pillows, the fury burning through me. He thought he was ending things on his terms. He thought he was reclaiming power. But he didn't realize that while he was out giving interviews, Michael and Emily had been quietly working behind the scenes. We'd uncovered something that would end Ryan's little pity tour once and for all. See, Ryan wasn't just a lawyer. He was ambitious. Reckless. And in the process of digging through old messages, Emily had stumbled across something incriminating. A set of emails between Ryan and a rival firm where he'd been quietly feeding information, possibly even breaking confidentiality. It wasn't just petty. It was illegal. Michael had packaged it all neatly. "If he keeps pushing," he told me, "we send this to the state bar. He'll lose his license." So when Ryan's interview hit, I didn't panic. I didn't scramble. I simply picked up my phone and sent him a message. "File whatever you want. But push me again, and I'll make sure the bar sees what you've been up to. One more move, Ryan, and your career is over. No threats, no drama. Just facts." The read receipt popped up almost instantly. And then, nothing. For the first time, Ryan Mitchell was silent, not because he was plotting his next move, but because he finally understood he'd been beaten. And this time, for good. The annulment papers came a week later. No phone call, no dramatic confrontation, just a courier dropping off an envelope with Ryan's signature neatly scrawled across the bottom. I didn't hesitate. I signed, sent them back, and with the swipe of a pen, the marriage that had barely begun was officially over. But here's the thing, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. The headlines shifted quickly after that. Ryan's pity tour fizzled out once people realized I wasn't playing his game anymore. And though I never had to leak the evidence of his misconduct, the threat alone was enough to keep him quiet. Rumor had it his firm pushed him out quietly, citing reputation concerns. I didn't shed a tear. Meanwhile, my world only grew brighter. The merger catapulted my company into a league I had only dreamed of. I was suddenly sitting in boardrooms with CEOs I used to admire from a distance, invited to conferences, asked to mentor young entrepreneurs. The same people who once dismissed me as Ryan Mitchell's fiancée were now introducing me as Samantha Clark, the woman who closed the deal of the year. As for my mom, she tried, at first, to claw her way back into my life, calling, pretending she wanted to support me, angling for photo ops with her successful daughter. But I kept her at a distance. I wasn't cruel, just firm. I had learned the hardest lesson of all: some people will never see your worth until you no longer need their approval. One evening, months later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment in downtown Dallas. The city lights stretched out before me, humming with possibility. Emily handed me a glass of wine, and we laughed about the chaos of that wedding night. "You know," she said, "your mom was right about one thing. He did leave you with nothing." I smirked, raising my glass. And somehow, nothing turned out to be worth $2 billion. We clinked glasses, the sound sharp and sweet in the night air. That was the moment I realized, revenge hadn't just been about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. And I had.